Feminine Roadmappers. Welcome back to Feminine Roadmap Podcast, the podcast that helps you navigate the challenges and the changes of midlife. If you are joining me here on YouTube, please remember to subscribe and click that bell so that you will know when new content comes out. If you're listening to me on any major podcasting platform, please remember to subscribe, rate, and share this podcast. Because today, my guest is sharing her story about being a small town girl who got it all. She got the job, the sweetheart, the dream home, and then it all came crashing down. This is her story of resurrection. My guest today is Beverly Willett. She is a TEDx speaker, a woman of resurrection, and the author of Disassembly Required and Memoir of Midlife Resurrection. Beverly, thank you so much for being on my show today.
You're welcome. Hi, Gina.
So I'm really excited to chat with you about your story. You are a woman who has lived a couple of lifetimes, and then another kind of life was thrust upon you. Why don't you share with us a little bit about your story?
And I hope I have a few more. So,
right? We're not done yet.
Ideas. Well, again, I am a small town girl. I grew up in Southern Maryland, is teeny tiny town nobody's ever heard of. And I was just constantly reading books. I was like a bookworm, and so I was the first in my family to go to college. And then I went to law school because I majored in political science, and it just seemed like that was the thing to do. And my grandfather said we've never had a lawyer in the family. I love law school though. And then I moved to New York City, which was like, wow, a lot of my friends, and they stayed around the same area. I moved all the way to New York City. I wasn't even there very long before I fell madly in love, got married. So I worked in, actually I was an entertainment lawyer, and I worked in copyright and entertainment for a while. And then I had my first daughter. I have two daughters that they're grown now. And I just absolutely just fell completely in love. I had no idea that there was this other kind of love that you could just fall completely in. We had been socking away money because we worked really hard as lawyers. We bought a beautiful house. The kids were growing up. They were healthy. I hadn't been ever happier in my life. I mean, really, it's true. And then my ex-husband had an affair. I had no idea. He got this new job. He had an affair, and he basically just walked out of our lives and never came back. And he sued me in divorce court. I was in divorce court for about 6 years. I wanted to save the marriage. I tried to save the marriage. I was unable to save the marriage. And then I just became a single mother, not by choice, with a big house to take care of and less money, and having to renovate part of the house, bring in tenants in the bottom floor, and raise two kids. Mostly, I mean, he was in their lives, but moms sometimes do most of the work anyway, especially with the raising the kids and running them around. So I was doing that and temping and just going at full speed. I lost 40 pounds. I mean, I looked like a skeleton. I can't even imagine now what my kids must have been feeling now that I can look at things in reverse, to look at their mother just go down to nothing, and I put the weight back on. I'd like to take a few more off now. But so one daughter went to college, and then the next was on her way. And I had this series of temp jobs, and I really just couldn't afford the mortgage anymore. It was just everything I was patching together to pay the mortgage just wasn't working. And I realized that the last thing that I had been holding on to, the kids were going out, the empty nest. I didn't really have a legal career anymore because I'd aged out of the system. I hadn't been in the system for a while, so I was just temping. So I kind of lost my career. And now I'd lost my marriage, and, the money that we had, I didn't have access to a lot of that anymore. So it was kind of down to the dream house. Here's the dream house. And then of course I had aged along the process. So, I had lost some of my youthful looks, and I just was holding on to that house. It was like the last thing. And I really didn't have any choice but to put it on the market and sell it and go through all this stuff that we had. And I really thought that was just going to take me down. Okay, that's the final thing. That's the last thing that's just going to take me down. I can't envision a future for myself at all. I had started to write and I'd had some things published, but I really could not envision what I was going to do, how I was going to cope. I was really, really sad, really sad. I think one of the things that happened is that being a single mother and constantly in motion is that I really had not grieved the end of my marriage. I hadn't, of course, I'd done a lot of crying, but I hadn't done that real period that we need of solid grieving. And during that last year of cleaning out my house, decluttering it, putting it on the market, I really finally grieved the end of my marriage and sort of put it to rest and put that behind me. And that was really like an amazing thing. It was almost that going through all of the sort of a life review is what I call it, going through everything from my past, stuff that he left, the children. It was like a life review that I could kind of see, and I could sort of put some things to rest and make peace with them. I had no idea this was even going to happen. This was not a plan that I had. Like, this is how I'm going to heal. This is how I'm going to move on. This is my plan. It just happened organically with this process. And I will have to say, in doing that, and I talk about this in my book, a friend who had been one of the friends to come over and help me. I did it mostly myself, but I had a few friends pop in and out to help me. She just wanted to start throwing stuff out, and I stopped her because intuitively something just hit me. It was like, no, you need to process everything that leaves this house. You need to process it and look at it, make peace with it, and let it go. And that became really the key to everything. And it just something just went off in my head that said, you have to do this. And it took a lot longer. It was harder. It was more gut wrenching than it would have been to just say, okay, let's just throw it all out, put it on the market and start over. So in a way I had to embrace more suffering and it was more time consuming and more excruciating. But that was the real process that I needed to follow, to let go, to heal, and to find out how I was going to have a new life, because it just opened up for me.
So it sounds like that journey of purging, if you will, physically purging, was actually more emotionally helpful than it probably was physically helpful, because you face these objects. And we have so many things in our life, right, that we don't really think about until someone passes or someone leaves your life. And now you have this object, and all of the emotion and the memories are wrapped up in these things that we have, right?
Yes. And they have, all of these things have, they can remind you of a time in your life, of a particular period. So they can be attached to people, they can be attached to events, to times in your life as you go along, to your children. So there's so many connections that these things stand for. And I mean, yes, we sort of know certain things, but all of them really do. All of them combine to create this, this tapestry, this whole thing that we have been weaving together through our lives, these little threads that we don't realize that's what we're doing. And by by doing that too, those threads, those attachments are so strong. I mean, and that I think was the key lesson that I learned from this. And it was very physical. So it was both emotional and this physical action of decluttering and going through things. I could see the connection. I could see how much I held on and had held on, because these things create these literal bonds. And I didn't, I mean, I'd studied Buddhism a while and I knew about attachment and I understood, but not on a real visceral level that became very apparent to me the first time that I thought about giving something away or selling it. I was like, whoa, I didn't know this was going to be hard. And it was hard because I was attached. So that was a revelation to me. It was very, very cool. And it was something that, I started intellectually was playing with. And then I had to say, now I have to figure out what it all means, because it really is tied to, we talk about letting go. And I remember, before reading books, letting go. Well, you got to let go. But how do we really do that? No, I mean, I think there's not a lot of practical talk about how do you really do that and what's involved.
Right.
So I realized that it was the attachment that was the problem. And so I had to start physically letting go. And so for me, there were a lot of big things that were just way too hard right out of the gate. Like that was just like, I wasn't ready yet, wasn't healed. I didn't have a little courage under my belt yet. Mm-hmm. So I had to start very small. I had to start with very little things. I mean, going through the pencil drawer and the junk drawer, I mean, it was really that, because I would look at everything and I go like, I don't know where to start. I don't even know how to do this. So let me start with something that I don't think is going to be too hard. The kids' stuff they got from gift bags at parties, and the erasers and the extra wine corks. And I mean, just like literally it was like that. And there was part of, I'm thinking back now, you're laughing, because by doing that and sort of starting out with something that wasn't so hard, there was some playfulness involved. And I realized one of the things that I discovered through this whole process is that I had always been a playful person. Like that's part of my nature. And it's one of the reasons why I just loved having kids. It's just like, because I got to be a kid again and I got to play again. And that was just, and then this heavy, heavy stuff just came into my life that I had to fight against to be playful. And I was like, I'm not negative. I'm a playful, happy person. And so this was like a huge revelation to me, that this was just a natural part of who I was. And doing this initial decluttering and stuff allowed me to kind of tap into that playfulness again.
So it sounds like maybe, this decluttering craze that went on during the pandemic, right? Was probably, for a lot of people, what I'm hearing you say, it really is an inside job with an outside expression. So you're thinking, I need to sell the house, I need to go through all of these things. But what's really happening for you is your inner world is being untangled and straightened out and clarified. And you talked about that grieving process. And it just sounds like a lot of the times, if I could draw this for other people, our things can be bondage to us when we feel like we have to keep them. You talked about clinging to that house because you felt like everything else had been lost. So it sounds like part of your resurrection, or actually the beginning of your resurrection, was opening your hands one finger at a time until you weren't gripping anymore to the quote things that were connected to. But one other thing that came across my mind.
You're absolutely right. And I just want to I don't want you to forget that thought, but I just want to tell you that that's why I came up with the title, Disassembly Required. It just seemed like that was exactly what I had to do and what was going on. But go ahead.
Well, the other thought was, you said that you had a friend that was like, just let it all go. And I think there's a time for that, but the journey that you took is your journey. Letting go is a process that each one of us experiences differently, right? And so I think there's a lot of grace that needs to be a part of that journey. I'm thinking if you're going through it with someone, not to impose your time frame on another person, because we can hurt a person who's hurting by pushing them too hard to get to a place we think they would be, quote, happier or more comfortable, right?
I am so glad you said that, because that is something that I've talked about that I feel very strongly about. And it relates to grieving because there's grieving is part of this process, and it doesn't matter what kind of loss it is. I mean, I had divorce, but I had other losses, the empty nest. So I was really dealing my youth and I wasn't, didn't have a new partner. So there were a lot of grieving things that I went on with. And some people, I think in our society, because I don't think we value grieving as much as we should in all of the various contexts that we should. Death is obviously, the biggest one. And even in that situation, I don't think that I think there are some religions, whatever, they still hold to that. And I think it's marvelous, because we need to have a grieving process, acknowledge it. But everybody's time frame is different. I think part of the problem is if you're not making progress, if you have excuses not to do anything. And eventually I had one friend who was just constantly excuses not to move on at all. And I could kind of see that I was starting to move and she was just resistant. And I had a neighbor tell me, when my ex left, when I was outside one day, she told me this story about a friend of hers who really kind of never recovered. And she said, I don't want that for you. I know that it takes time, and everybody has their own time frame, because we're all dealing with different stuff, and we can't always put all the energy that we want to in just that. Mm-hmm. So, but she said, I don't want you to stay stuck your whole life. And I pray that you don't, because I want you to eventually heal and move on in your time. And that really stuck with me a lot. Sometimes when I'd say like, oh, here I am crying again, and I'm feeling like I'm not moving along, but I know I'm taking baby steps, and I know that's what I want. I know I don't want to stay stuck in this and have this be my life. A lot of people will read my book and they will say, oh, I'm so sorry for you. And how do you feel? And it's like, I'm like, that's the backstory and that's how I got here. But thank you. But I'm not there anymore. We all have our moments. I mean, this is the 20th anniversary this year of when my ex walked out. And this is the first podcast I've done. I mean, I did a few, but it just struck me the other day. Oh my gosh, this is the 20th anniversary. And some people have said to me, yeah, I'm so sorry, whatever. And I'm like, thank you, but I am not there. My book is pretty, I lay it all out because I want people to know that I recognize how tough it is. And I'm right there with you, but I'm not in that place anymore.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of when you go to a high school reunion.
Oh.
And and it's been 20, 30 years or more. And the only way people know you is in that context.
Right.
Or that's the only way they're comfortable with you. So I'm wondering how this affected your identity and your social life, because I have had friends who've gone through divorces, and they also lose their social circle sometimes because everyone's married and now you're single. There's this weird kind of like, where do I fit in the world?
I had that happen to me because, so I would say that most of our friends together were couple friends. And there were, and maybe it was, I was really more friendly with the wife than he was with the husband or whatever like that. But we had couple friends. And then I had mom friends from the playground. Okay. And most of those mom friends, not all of them, but most of those mom friends were also partnered.
Yes.
So this and that just, and I had some of those couple friends stay around initially, and then they kind of drifted off. And I have to say, I felt abandoned a second time by not everyone, because I have one lady. She is my rock from New York. I mean, she stayed with me through thick and thin. I stayed with her through menopause, and just so, not everyone, but yes, a lot of people drifted away. And so I had to find new friends. I was, when my kids went to on weekends with their dad, when they went on vacations with him, it was like, where are my friends? And it was very disconcerting at first. I never wanted to have a weekend alone. I just, not that I didn't have things to do and catch up on, but I was just even more lonely, and I felt just terrible. So I would try to have something to do, or want to, find single women and whatever, so I could have something to do, because I was very lonely. And here's something that I learned in that whole process, which I may have said something in my book, but I really didn't discuss it very much. And that is that I had to learn to be comfortable alone with myself. And in order to sort of get to know myself again, to reclaim that life, which was before I met my ex-husband, reclaim the life that I had, person who I am before I had children, because all these people, are kind of moving on with their life. Okay. And so you can't do that when you don't have time for yourself, when you're not sitting in that room. The first meditation retreat I went on, it was a silent meditation retreat. And after about a day, I wrote about it for Salon. I came running out. I went up to this Buddhist nun, and I was like, I wonder if my kids are okay. And she's like, they're okay. What happened is that I didn't want to be alone. I did not want to be, I had such an aversion to being with myself, to being alone. It was scary. It was really scary. And so, but I kind of started to play with it, just like the decluttering. I could see a little bit of possibility in these things that happened to me. And instead of shutting it off and saying, I'm too scared, because I think the undercurrent of all of this is fear. Mm-hmm. That's what stops us from examining, from looking, from being by ourselves. It's all fear. Fear is at the bottom of all of it. So I could see there was fear. And again, I thought, well, and I remember the very first weekend that I said, kids are away with him. I'm not going to plan anything. I'm not going to grasp and call someone and make a plan. And I remember an old friend coming to town and calling out of the blue and saying, are you free? Well, I started to realize that I could not allow things to come into my life if I didn't give some space for them. And that literally required not putting stuff on the calendar all the time, and literally just having some mental space. So that was a really powerful lesson for me, that here I am. I've been in Savannah now 8 years. So it's 8 years since I sold my house, moved, settled here from Brooklyn, and I still do that. And of course, COVID was hard because there was so much free time, but I remembered it. And sometimes, I'll say, okay, that I don't have anything going on. This is good, because I don't know what can happen, or maybe I just need to rest. So that's sort of something that I have put in my life, a lesson that I learned during all those years. That's really a part of my life now. And I am, I'll go to dinner by myself. I'll go to the movies by myself. I've talked to some people that say, oh, I can't do that. I couldn't possibly do that. Well, of course you can. You just haven't tried. You just haven't tried.
That is fascinating to me, because you're talking about clutter on a whole nother level. There's a time clutter that you're talking about. So you dealt with the stuff clutter, which brings up emotional clutter, which makes you want to time clutter. Like the clutter just keeps moving around in your life.
It's true. And I remember, reading that book about clutter. I won't mention the author, and thinking, she's got it all wrong, because she's just saying, keep what you love, keep what makes
brings you
happy,
joy,
and brings you joy. And actually, none of stuff can't bring you joy. It doesn't have the possibility of bringing you joy. It can be pleasant. You can have pleasant feelings arise from it, but it doesn't make you happy. It weighs you down. And so if you I have a new little house here, just a little cottage, and I've redecorated and whatever, and I enjoy pretty things, but I am just not attached to them. If I have to sell them or whatever, I really don't have that. I challenge myself sometimes, and I go into a room and I go like, what if something happened to that? And I'm like, well, I enjoy it. I almost enjoy it now more than I ever did, because I'm not attached to it. So I can find the joy without the tugging on my heart and the possibility of pain if it's taken away.
It's back to that grip. When you're gripping something, you're focusing on the gripping, not the actual object itself. It's the idea of the object, or the idea of the experience.
Exactly. There's that physical connection, which I never kind of made sense. It's always like, okay, there's the physical side and there's the emotional or mental, but I think there's this total connection between the two. And that's kind of cool, because it means you can kind of try things out.
And there's freedom in release, I would imagine, that your resurrection experience from wife, mom, career woman, to stay at home, to single mom, temping, not having a partner. There was a process that brought you. We talked about this before we hit record. Reinvention is not the word that you prefer. You prefer the word resurrection. So let's have a moment about, what is it about the word resurrection that resonated with you so much to use it to put forward your message?
So I guess if I had to have another word to equate with the resurrection, I would say rebirth. In my mind, I think it is rebirth. Resurrection, reinvention, it's great. We reinvent ourselves as, I was a lawyer, now I'm a writer. And, so we shift gears. So I think of reinvention more as shifting a gear into something else. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not I'm not,
Right.
attaching any negativity to it, because I've reinvented myself in ways too. But with the resurrection, I really think it was a rebirth, because it was friends said to me during this whole process of me cleaning out, selling, and figuring out what I was going to do. They said, you're going to be able to reclaim your life. And, I had asked them about it, and they really couldn't describe what they meant by that. But they said it. They said it a lot. And it was like in the back of my mind, reclaim my life. Okay. And so when I kept going through the process of all of this, it was not only letting go and grieving, it was a process of examination, as I had said before, of who I was before all of this other stuff happened in my life to form the family. And I actually started seeing that in the context of coming across papers and mementos and things I'd done. And I remember there was this dress that I had made, as a teenager, and I kept it because I don't know why I still loved it. And my daughter said, you never told me you could do things like that. I found out that I was actually a creative person too, in terms of a visual, like I could create this dress. So I found, and I had remembered that for the longest time, as a writer, I couldn't wait to get my first clip. I want my first clip, that first clip is like, and you're getting rejections, that first clip is like so important. So in the process of going through all this stuff, I came across all of these clips from high school when I was on the student newspaper, but I actually had 2 columns in the local town paper. I had a local news column, and I wrote a sports column. Me. I've always been a football fan, but I wrote a sports column. I had 2 columns in the local paper. I had clips like that. Now they were teenager clips and whatever, but they were still in like the local paper. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I kind of remembered it, but this wasn't anything I ever really thought of when I thought about having my first clip as a professional writer. So it felt so comforting, because it just felt that I was totally reclaiming who I'd always been, and the joy and the playfulness and all of that. I was reclaiming who I had always been. And so it was by doing that and embracing her again, it really was a resurrection. It felt like it really was a rebirth. The person who just said, I'm going to New York City. I'm going to find a job in New York City and be an entertainment lawyer. Oh, really? Little girl from this teeny tiny town. And I don't pat myself on the back. I worked really hard, but I always had this feeling of possibilities in life, possibilities, and being open to possibilities, and just sort of like leading with my heart. That's who I always was. And a lot of that had gotten kind of shut down with the divorce, with the hardships of life. And I was constantly fighting against them, but it just felt I was fighting against them all the time. Like she was fighting, I could see she was fighting to come out again, but she had this to-do list, this huge to-do list, and no sleep. And all of a sudden, this horrible thing, I'm not married, I have no kids, I have no house anymore. This horrible, horrible thing was like the key to just all that coming back. I can have all that again. And it was always there. So I guess, if that kind of tells you what I meant by resurrection, because it really felt, it felt freeing. It didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like that heaviness had literally just lifted. And I remember that my mom, she passed away a few years after I moved, and she would say to me on the phone, because she heard me during those awful times, and I really confided in her, and she said, "Your voice has changed." She said, literally, what I hear on the phone, because she lived in Maryland, and we would mostly just talk on the phone. She said, "Your voice has changed." And it was odd. And when I came here, I mean, people knew that I'd been divorced, but I had a whole new life and things to talk about. Everything wasn't pegged to that anymore, which also brought me down. It was kind of like defining. And that didn't have to, the resurrection part, that didn't define me, and I didn't allow it to define me anymore, even though I write about it, and I've continued to write about it, but it's not something that defines my character, my personality, any of that.
What I hear you saying is that was a part of your story. You've moved to a new chapter. It still informs who you are and who you've become, right? Because you went through it. But there's this sense of, I love that you said reclaiming who you've always been, because one of the things I do is I'm a coach. I help people identify things, reinvent their life, move forward, to move past, beyond, around, depending on what word resonates with them. And this idea of remembering who you've been, remembering the things that light your fire, remembering those things that come to you naturally, because the things that are more natural to us are easier to lose, because they come naturally and they get kind of overrun with life, like that love of writing, or love of reading, or love of riding horses, or whatever it is. There's a lot of people that life overtakes those things that are natural joys for us. Not that we don't have joy in other ways, but we lose a little bit of ourselves sometimes when we go from those younger years to having children and husbands. And so I feel like the rebirth, as I'm processing what you're saying to me, makes so much sense, because there's it's a gardening kind of analogy, right? There were seeds and some early plants when you were young. Your garden changes over the years, right? But sometimes you go back to those, let's call them heirloom plants. Those things from your history that you're like, oh yeah, I loved that thing. And how really cool that you had that kind of success in your teen years. And here you are years later. And the reason we're talking is because you've written a book and you have a story to tell. And there's so much hope in that. No matter what you experienced in that grieving process you went through, there was a rebirth and a life on the other end. It was a different life, but it sounds like you have this candle of hope that you can hold up for women who've been through such difficult things, to say, trust the process. You will get through to the other side if you're willing to lean in. Like you said, your neighbor said she knew someone who never got over it.
Yeah. Well, people would write to me, because initially, I was writing some parenting articles, and then after the divorce, I started writing some divorce articles and what I'd gone through, and people would write to me, and they still do actually, and they'd say, "I want to save my marriage too. How do I go about doing it?" And, I would tell them what I could, but ultimately what I started to understand is that I hadn't been able to do that. I really couldn't give them firsthand knowledge. I could point them to other people, because other people have written books about it and whatever, and I could do that, but I couldn't do that. What I had done is I had gotten through to the other side, reclaimed my life, found happiness again. Not that I ever say, I still believe in marriage as much as I ever did. But I had to, ultimately accept it, or just say, this is the end of it and this is how I'm going to live. What I could do is I could tell them, if you're not able to, and for those people who haven't been able to, you can go on, you can be happy, and let me share how I've done it. And so I think there was a little bit of a frustration on my part of not really being able to help certain people and answer their questions. And I realized, well, this is what I can do. And because it was such a process filled with such joy for me to get to the other end, it was something I just wanted to write. I mean, it just was like, it was hard to write because I had to go through the backstory and put myself back in those painful places again. But that too, I think, has shown people that, you're not alone, that you were really not alone. There are lots of people who go through this, and you can get through it. And this is what I can tell you how to do, or at least give you some ideas of what is the problem if you're still suffering. Why is it still happening? And what can you try and kind of break that loose so that you can have some freedom again.
So it sounds like asking yourself good questions is a part of the process. Identifying the connections or the hangups that you're having. Getting curious maybe about why you feel particularly hung up, stuck, blocked, and wouldn't you say, Beverly, that because we're emotional beings, everything has an emotion attached to it for the most part. Even if we're detached, that's an emotional decision, right? And so it really is a journey. There's not a quick pill or a one and done.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people, like my friend, who just throw it all in the bag, and get it out of the house, or, start dating again. We want quick pills in our culture, and we take them all the time because we don't like pain. And I don't like pain either. I have arthritis in my knees. I don't like it, but I think with these kind of emotional hurts that we have, and these losses that we have, they're going to cause pain. And I think sometimes we need to sit with the pain. We really do, because I think that we can learn so much through that pain. And a lot of people are prone to just saying, I can't deal with that. Let me not look. Let me move on. Let me do something else to like fill up the calendar on the weekend. This is what I was doing. Let me just fill up the calendar so that I don't have time to be alone. So that definitely goes to your point. I agree.
Gosh, our time has gone quickly.
How did that happen?
It's the downside is time goes quickly. In some cases, it's a good thing. In some cases like this, it feels like it's gone too quickly. But Beverly, I would love to have you anchor in maybe 3 things that you would like my tribe to hear. And it can be things you learned from your journey, or things you want to remind people of if they're going through the journey. It's whatever comes to your mind. What 3 things would you like to share? And if you come up with 4, okay. You can keep going. I don't want to overwhelm people. Give me the top 20 tips, that sort of a thing. Right. And I'm going to write down what you say. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to, off the top of my head, I'll just say one thing that definitely comes to mind, because it's a way that I sign some of my books. And I forgot, I've got my book.
Yes,
here.
There it is. Disassembly Required.
And you can get it on Amazon. So something that I sign, I don't sign all my books the same way, but something that I've used a lot, because I believe in it so much. And that is to tell people, you are stronger and braver than you know. I firmly believe that, because I had so much fear about so many things in my life. And if I can do it, you can do it. So I firmly believe people are stronger and braver than they know. And they have to really kind of embrace that. It takes a while to work up to, but I'm I'm convinced it is true. It is true. I would also say, if you're trying to make changes and you're going through some of these losses, something that I said before, which I think is really essential, and that is, don't start with something big. Start with something small. Make some small change in your life. Try something small. Try going to the movies by yourself. Try getting rid of one thing. Just start small, because we all need to grow in self-confidence and courage. And so don't get down on yourself by thinking how heavy it is and how big and how many things, you have to do. And, well, I guess I better start here. Just start small and allow yourself to start having some successes, because that really will make you feel more self-confident. I think. One thing that just comes to mind quickly too, and that is, I think sometimes we get in these ways of thinking and these kind of ruts, and and this is something that I had the bulletin board. So I talk about this in my book, that I have this bulletin board where I'd find quotes that I loved or things that just came to my brain, and I stick them up there. And one thing that I had, and every once in a while I'd look at it when I didn't know what to do and I thought I was kind of stuck, and it said, do the opposite. So I think sometimes we don't think about that, because we do get into the ruts and we have so many habits. And sometimes that's another way of getting unstuck and moving forward, is just to say, okay, I'm going to do the opposite of that. And so that was something that I know that I tried a lot. I think also I just think keep in your head that one of the main things, we always have this joke about everything. There's nothing certain in life but death and taxes. And I think that the other thing that is certain in life is change. Change is the third thing that is absolutely certain. Everything is change. Every moment is change. We are not going to get out of this earthly life without continued change. And so, having gone through all of this with my book, I have had health problems. I almost died in a car accident 2 years ago. My mom passed away. So many things. If I hadn't learned these lessons, I could have just gone way down in that pit again and stayed there. And sometimes I've been very upset about some of the things that have happened, but I've always kept in my mind that this is not abnormal. This is not abnormal. This is the way life is. And we have to be able to find a way of being flexible with it and maintaining our joy. Even if we're down there sad for a while, remember that everything is change. So,
and
that helps.
That's such a powerful thought, because our resistance to the realities of the way life works causes us more suffering on top of the suffering that we have, doesn't it?
Yes, because we resist all the time.
And that resistance isn't the good kind. So, Beverly, I want to thank you for being on the show. How can people find you and your book?
So you can find my book on Amazon, Disassembly Required, and I have a website, beverlywillett.com. It's WILLETT.com. And there, I have all of my articles that have a link. I've written, hundreds of articles for all kinds of publications about all kinds of things, and even a few humorous articles about getting older and starting to shrink. So if you want to have a read of just, things on lots of different topics, you can go there. And I have radio interviews, podcasts.
And you're a TEDx speaker, so that's also on YouTube. People can find you there.
Yes, and it's the topic of the talk is how to begin again.
Perfect. Well, Beverly, I am so grateful that you said yes to me, and I really have appreciated this cup of something wonderful with you, sitting and hearing your story and having you share those nuggets of wisdom and experience. Because when someone like you decides to, cliche, turn lemons into lemonade, to turn the losses into gains, to do the math of life and have something so rich to offer at the end of it. What a blessing that is. And I'm so grateful that you took that time. And that brings you here where you can share something so wonderful with women and men to help them endure some of the more difficult things that life brings along. And I'm really grateful for that.
Thank you. I'm grateful that you reached out to me and I found you. And
Isn't
I've
that
listened to
special?
some of your other podcasts, as I was preparing for this one, and really love the people that you're interviewing. So I just
Thank
wanted
you
to tell
so
you
much.
that.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
It is the greatest joy. I always joke that podcasting is a guilty pleasure because the extrovert in me gets to meet all these people.
Yeah.
This is my favorite thing, to just talk to people I don't know and to get to know them and to hear their story. So it's really quite the joy. But today, friends, I want to thank you so much for joining Beverly and I. And if you want to head over to www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 286, you will find show notes. I will have Beverly's book and her website so you can get to her. If you are here on YouTube, I will have those links down below in the description. Friends, this message has come into your life today for a reason. Beverly has walked a journey that can light the path for you if you're finding yourself in some kind of a difficult time of loss or challenge or change that you're having difficulty wrestling with. Remember that you're not alone. We all have these similar experiences. And remember to trust yourself in the journey. There is another side. Please continue to press in. Trust yourself. Don't rush where you don't feel rushing is necessary, and let go of what you need to let go of. But know that this journey is yours and yours alone. And women like Beverly have written books, Disassembly Required, that can help you find those nuggets along the way to get through to the other side where you find that peace and joy and contentment again. Stay curious, my friend. Stay persistent. Rest when you need to, but continue the race. We'll look forward to cheering you on when you get to the other side. So thank you so much for joining us today, my friends. Take care. Bye-bye.